Praise be the Lord Jesus Christ, and welcome to the Catholic Citizen this week. Coming to you live from Northwest Ohio, and Nick is live from,
I'm in Italy.
he is in Italy, folks, live from the mother country. It's great to have you this week on the Catholic Citizen. We're talking about freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and it's going to be a great show. So let's do it. Oh, one other thing we're covering. One other thing we're covering is what do you do when you have two flawed candidates like we have in this year's election? And I think there's some debate about the question that I'm going to pose today, but I think it's still important to cover. So first and foremost, on this week's Catholic Citizen, I want to look at another really important issue for Catholics when you go to the voting booth. And so we've covered the preeminent issue that you need to be concerned about. That's the issue of life, the issue of abortion, ensuring that every single little child is protected, is cared for, is loved, is nourished, and is giving the first fundamental right, the right to simply live. This is foundational, and this is why we talk about it so often here on the Catholic Citizen. The second show, we talk a little bit about the family and the importance of upholding the family as the central unit of society, recognizing that family is founded on the marriage between a man and a woman, and that the Catholic is called to reject any false gender ideologies which are put forward by the progressive left nowadays to say that, yeah, a little boy can transition to become a little girl. There's no such thing. A boy is a boy, a girl is a girl. That's common sense that the Catholic must bring to play when it comes to this election. And you have the Democratic Party right now has fully embraced and fully adopted this transgender ideology to say that, yeah, men should be in women's sports, boys should be allowed in girls' restrooms, and that individuals actually should be allowed to transition to another sex beginning when they're little kids. That's insanity. It needs to be rejected. And it needs to be rejected as you vote as well. The third issue that I want to cover this week, and we're going to do this really quickly, folks, because we don't have a lot of time. And Nick, again, I don't know how much bottles of wine he's even had tonight, so we don't want him talking too much. No, I'm just kidding. But with that being said, we want to talk a little bit about religious liberty on this week's show. It's really important. And then finally, I've been getting a lot of comments from a series that I sent out to churches. It's a series of bulletin inserts, everything from immigration to the environment, to racism, to abortion, so that pastors could kind of educate their faithful. But I've gotten a couple people just reach back out and say, well, what do we do when we have two candidates who are both pro-choice? So they're claiming that both candidates in this election, Kamala Harris and President Trump, are both pro-choice. So what do we do? Because as a Catholic, we can't vote for a pro-choice candidate. So I'm going to wrap up this show talking about that very question on a few different levels. But first, let's go ahead and look at religious liberty just real quick. And the USCCB has talked about the fact that we're facing religious liberty threats. A lot of them come around the issue of abortion, whether it's forcing Catholic hospitals to have to provide contraception, or Catholic entities like the Little Sisters of the Poor to provide contraception or abortifacient drugs to their employees. You also have the challenges of Catholic adoption agencies being forced to adopt out to same-sex couples or losing their licenses. So there's a lot of threats to religious liberty that's taking place. A lot of these take place through like Health and Human Services, and these are all positions, the heads of those organizations, that are appointed by the president. So it really matters who the president is, because he's going to appoint those individuals in these particular roles. But let's just look at one particular case here, which is particularly alarming, and that has been the redefinition of marriage as something other than between a man and a woman, and then kind of what that has played itself out. So we were told during the whole debate with Obergefell in the Supreme Court that it was just about two people loving each other. It had nothing to do with anything else. No one was going to lose their freedoms. Why do you hate people by not allowing them to love each other? Look, as a Catholic, we never tell anybody that you can't love anybody. We are based on love itself, and that is God. But there is the way that God has established the universe, including some institutions, including the institution of marriage. So we believe marriage is between a man and woman. We don't think that's hate speech, and I don't think it should be hate speech. That's been literally what all of human history has believed up until a few years ago. Now, with that being said, you might even have a different view on that than me. But here's the crux of the issue. Do we change the rest of the law then to acknowledge one point of view and to really denigrate and to punish the other point of view? And so, one way that we've punished the view that marriage exists between a man and woman is the adoption world. So, I would think that we could all agree that adoption is a really important thing. We need as many people involved and engaged in adoption, getting kids out of foster care, getting them into loving and caring homes, and desiring what's best for the kid. And we know from a sociological perspective that each and every child ever existed came from both a mother and a father. And a mother and father both bring unique gifts to bear when it comes to raising a child. Now, there's going to be situations obviously where there's going to be a single parent. There's going to be maybe a divorce. Not ideal situations, and a child can still thrive in those particular environments. But ideally, both mom and dad are loving, they're caring, they're in the same home, and they're raising their children that they help to create. Now, because Catholic Charities, though, has said, look, we believe that we're going to, or we desire to have children in loving homes where both the mom and dad are present in San Francisco, Boston, I believe Louisiana, and also the entire state of Illinois. Catholic Charities adoption agencies had their licenses removed or revoked simply because they believe that every child should be adopted out to a family with both a mom and a dad. And so progressive politicians came along and said, we're going to remove your licenses, and no longer can you do any adoptions because you won't go along with the state mandated understanding of what marriage is and where we think that you should place your children. So that's what's at stake in this upcoming election. Are we going to continue to have progressive politicians putting pressure on Catholic agencies, whether it's Catholic hospitals to be engaged in contraception or abortion, or whether it's Catholic adoption agencies forced out of the adoption business simply because they're Catholic? Now, Kamala Harris, when she was in the Senate during President Trump's first administration, actually questioned some of President Trump's appointees to say, do you know that you're a part of the Knights of Columbus? And do you think that disqualifies you from being in the government? Simply because the Knights of Columbus believe some of the things that I'm talking about, that life begins at conception and that marriage is between a man and a woman. So we have individuals running for president who have been openly hostile towards Catholic point of views, or individuals a part of Catholic organizations in the past. If this doesn't set off alarm bells for us, I don't know what will. Now, combined with this understanding of religious liberty is the freedom of speech, though. But Nick, you want to jump in? Nick, unfortunately, I hate to cut you off. I just can't hear you in the video. It might be some of the wine has seeped into the microphone. Well, go ahead. Well, I tell you what, I'll continue, Nick, and then you just jump in whenever you get the voice working on your end. But let's look now at freedom of speech, because I think it's just as important when it comes to religious liberty. And part of religious liberty is the ability to live out your faith in the public square. But not only that, but also to say the things that you think are right and true and just. And we need to create spaces to do that. And one of the spaces we have, unlike most of the media today, is social media. You look at X, and like it or not, Elon Musk has come and he's given individuals freedom on that platform. Now, I don't agree with everything that's on that platform, nor do I think we should as Catholics. However, I do believe in a society when you have freedom, you have an opportunity to bring those thoughts, those ideas to bear in the public square, and then you can kind of finally, address those ideas, and the truth can kind of rise to the top. But if you're suppressing different voices, you only give sometimes more credence to those voices, and you don't allow those free exchange of ideas. And most recently, what's been kind of, again, concerning for me in this upcoming election is that despite what it says in the party platforms, and again, I encourage you to read the party platforms on these issues, both are pretty benign on that, although the Republican Party platform does say that we believe that individuals can live with the dictates of their conscience in accordance with those beliefs, not just in places of worship, but in everyday life. That's a key thing in the Republican Party platform that I think is really, really important. The Democrats just mentioned separation of church and state, page 48 there in the Democratic Party platform, and then page 20 in the Republican Party platform. With all that being said, we look at this in practice. We have those troubling things that have been going on with Catholic adoption agencies. But when it comes to free speech, 4 examples that are just alarming to me in most recent months. First, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said that we lose total control when we can't moderate the content on these platforms, meaning the government. You have John Kerry saying this, but look, if people only go to one source, they're putting out disinformation. Our First Amendment stands as a major block to the ability to be able to hammer it out of existence. Folks, that's why the First Amendment exists, is to protect people's right to speech. But then going to the presidential candidates themselves, Tim Walz had an interview recently. He's, again, the 2024 running mate of Vice President Harris, said that there is no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy. So I get it. We don't want hate speech, but who's defining what hate speech is? So in my world, the Southern Poverty Law Center has claimed that CCV, who I work for, is a hate speech organization because we believe marriage is between a man and a woman. So you draw some dangerous lines here when you're talking about hate speech. But finally, Vice President Harris, there has to be a responsibility that's placed on these social media sites to understand their power. They are directly speaking to millions of people without any level of oversight or regulation, and that has to stop. So a clear call for the government to regulate social media. But we know what happens when they do. Stories that are true get suppressed. Look, it was misinformation, folks, to say that the COVID virus came from a lab in China. That was misinformation. It was misinformation to say that standing 6 feet away doesn't really do anything when it comes to the COVID virus. But yet, all those things were labeled misinformation or just shut down. Nick and I did a video on socialism in last year's election. That was taken off YouTube because that was labeled as misinformation. So it's very dangerous when these individuals start drawing the lines on these issues. All right. So Nick, is your mic working now? It is not working. I still can't hear him. You look great. The Italian countryside, although it looks dark, also looks great as well. So, Nick, just keep your face up there because you look beautiful. But with that being said, let's finish up here because I've gotten a lot of questions about this, and I just want to address it for folks at home. In my video that I shared, in the article that I sent out concerning the bulletins as far as whether or not a Catholic can vote for a politician which is supporting abortion, I said, no, a Catholic can't vote for someone who's supporting abortion. So stand by that. That is truth. That is reality. You can't vote for someone who is advocating for the killing of innocent children, which is the preeminent issue of life. Now, here's the problem, though. What if you have 2 candidates that are supportive of abortion? What do you do then? Do you not vote? Do you find it a third party to vote for? I think it's a perfectly legitimate thing to vote for a third party, obviously. And Nick, just so you know, now you're completely off the screen. So not only can we not hear you, but we can't see you. Anyway, with that being said, so what do we do here, though? And let's say, just for the sake of argument, that, and I don't necessarily fully believe this, to say that President Trump now is just simply a pro-abortion candidate, but let's just say that he is. Let's say that he's pro-abortion. Kamala Harris is also pro-abortion. What the Catholic must look at, and what we must understand, it is licit to vote for a pro-abortion candidate if there's 2 pro-abortion candidates against each other. And the Catholic is going to vote then, in that case, for the lesser of 2 evils to mitigate the evil that could be done by one of the other candidates, preeminently, first and foremost, on this issue of life. So, for example, you could have one candidate that believes Catholic hospitals should be forced to perform abortions. Okay. The other candidate is simply pro choice, and they just say, look, I don't care what hospitals do. I don't care what doctors do. I'm just pro choice. And that's just kind of where I stand on that. Now, both candidates advocating for the right to kill preborn children, but one candidate wants to forcibly uh, look at religious institutions and force them to perform abortions or contraception, whatever it might be. It is morally licit in that circumstance to vote for the candidate who might be pro-abortion, but at least the evil that they are attempting to accomplish is not as bad as the evil that the other is accomplishing. You're trying to stop the evil that the other person is attempting to accomplish. Okay.
All
So,
right.
Sam,
Can you hear me now, Peter?
I can hear you. Praise the Lord. He's live from Italy,
Oh,
folks.
all right. Honestly, the issue is not just Italy can have good internet in certain places, but my hotel Wi-Fi is terrible. Um, so I apologize for any challenge here. Totally out of my control. I am right now in Sorrento, Italy, right on the coast, and it is absolutely gorgeous here, which you really can't get a sense of because of the fact that it's nighttime now. But yeah, it's pretty beautiful here. I don't know if this will work for me to just kind of uh, show it around a little bit. Yeah, this is doing absolutely nothing for us. Anyway, okay. So I had two thoughts. I was battling the technology here. I wasn't able to catch everything you were saying, but there were two things I wanted to respond to or provide my perspective on. One is you mentioned. Can you still hear me, Peter?
I can. Yeah, you're good.
Okay, you mentioned the thing about Kamala Harris when she was grilling those guys. Was it in Congress or in the Senate about
In the
being
Senate, yeah, when she
Knights of
became
Columbus?
senator. Hmm.
Yes, it is the moment. So I knew that story before, and the moment you said it this time, I was struck by something in a powerful way, and that is, it was a problem to her that they were Knights of Columbus. Okay, understood. That is very obnoxious and absolutely intolerant of a beautiful faith tradition that the Knights of Columbus are associated with, that is Catholicism. Um, but what I was blown away by was the Knights of Columbus. There are some Knights of Columbus. I'm a Knight of Columbus. You are a Knight of Columbus. Um, but they absolutely, there on the Senate floor, would come across many, many more people who would fall under another category of being Catholic. And the fact that being Catholic does not draw the same um, ire, does not draw the same help Kamala come to the same conclusions about a concern that they would be pro life, or in her twisted, distorted perspective, be against women's health rights. Um, it's just really heartbreaking to me that the idea that they are Knights of Columbus, that was a problem. But how many Catholics have come across the floor that don't get grilled the same way for being Catholic when to be Catholic is also to be pro-life uh, from conception to natural death, from natural conception to natural death. Like to be a Catholic should draw the same preoccupation, the same concern on her part, right? But as a vice president, who was her president? A quote unquote Catholic. And so I just that really mind boggled me is like, whoa, all of a sudden it's a problem because it's Knights of Columbus. But any Catholic that would be in the same position as those gentlemen who were Knights of Columbus, any Catholic to be in the same position, being receiving the same inquiry, should receive a similar scrutiny. The problem is that Catholics are very confused about this life issue, and that is why I'm so grateful, Peter, for the work that you're doing here with the Catholic Citizen, the work that you're doing elsewhere with CCV, and I think we have to do the work of helping Catholics understand how to operate in this modern society because not enough Catholics do understand, and that is why that's the reason that there isn't as much of an impulse like, oh, you're a Catholic, so you must be against women's rights to choose or whatever. Like, oh, you're a Knights of Columbus, you must be against women's right to choose. I just think we have work to do. I was just really disheartened when I heard you retell this story now, Do you have any thoughts about that?
I do. And it's just the reality. It's a certain type of Catholic that they're after, and it's the Catholics that are actually living the teaching faith of the church. So when Amy Coney Barrett was up for the Supreme Court nomination, Dianne Feinstein, another senator, said, the dogma lives loudly within her, commenting negatively on Amy Coney Barrett. And the dogma they're talking about is she believes in life. So you can look at Kamala Harris's question she asked the Knights of Columbus gentlemen, and it should be a question that she should have to ask every Catholic if you're against these particular views. But she said, were you
Exactly.
aware that the Knights of Columbus opposed a woman's right to choose when you join the organization? So she is pointing this out because they support pro-life. Now, you should be able to say, were you aware that Catholics opposed a woman's right to choose when you join the church? And every Catholic should say, yes, and I proudly stand for life. But that's the issue of
Yes.
challenge, is that not every Catholic is living their faith in the public square. And for too
Yeah.
long, we've been sitting on the sidelines when it comes to our faith. We believe in this misguided understanding of church and state, that we should keep our faith separate from our politics, but that has never been the call of the church, nor has it been the call of our country and the founders of this country, who in every single government charter, the 13 colonies, when they began, Nick, if you read their charters, like Virginia, for example, they said, we exist. The colony of Virginia exists for the propagation of the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's why we have In God We Trust on our coins. It's why we have Moses in the Supreme Court. It's why we start every Congress with a word of prayer. We believe that the moral foundation of our country comes from God. And here's the issue. We want freedom of speech. We want freedom of religion. We want people to be able to see equal and human dignity, but we don't want where those ideas came from. And those ideas come from Jesus Christ. They come from the church. They come
Hmm.
from the Holy Scriptures, which the founders based a lot of our even governmental structure upon. So what we've done is we want all those things. We want equality. We just cut the flower off from its stem. And so we say, here, look, everyone's of equal dignity, but we have no reason or purpose to say why. So when you do that, eventually the flower is going to die off. And we're going to see that too. So you look at, for example, just real quick on the medical field, a lot of secular medical people still buy into the Hippocratic Oath, and they still say, well, we should do no harm. Well, why should we do no harm? You're able to twist that in any way, shape, or form that you want to get your end goals if you don't believe that those kind of principles have a foundational belief. So do no harm for you could turn into, well, we're looking at a utilitarian ethic, and if we take these organs from this brain dead person, yeah, we're maybe not quite sure whether or not they're dead or not, but we're going to save 5 people over here. So we saved 5, and that is better than maybe just losing one life that we're not quite sure which is dead. So there's a
Yes.
lot of things that are in danger for us moving forward in the years to come, unless we have that foundational Christian, Judeo-Christian ethic as far as where our laws, ideas, and principles come from.
Yes. Amen, brother. And the other thing I wanted to comment on is what you were talking about in relation to adoption for same-sex couples. The issue to me that I was thinking about when you were bringing this up was, um, I was reflecting on the degree to which we have dehumanized the human person, that we have um, really reduced our appreciation for the dignity of a human person. And what we're seeing in this, in an example like this discussion about adoption, is we're turning adoption of children into, we're lowering it to the level of essentially adopting a pet, going to the pet store and getting a new dog or getting a new iguana. Like, you can just imagine, my wife and I right now are discerning getting a dog. Like, this question of, man, I've always wanted to have a dog. Golly gee willikers, I would love to have a dog. And there are so many couples out there that, now I also want to be very present to the real struggle that a lot of couples have faced of infertility, and how their desire to have children is such a beautiful and important thing. Um, but the commoditization of children that we're seeing, where we are reducing the expectations inherently in these decisions to allow same-sex couples to adopt a child, we are reducing the expectations that are put on the would-be parents. Because, for example, in the past, actually, there's a really beautiful illustration of this in a number of Hollywood movies. One place my head goes to is the movie Big Daddy by um, Adam Sandler, um, where he struggles to adopt this kid that shows up on his doorstep. Like we see depicted in Hollywood for decades now, and then in the lives of people around us that we know, we see that these adoption agencies really put parents through a rigorous interview process and background checks and all these things. Why? Because of a concern for the child. It is always coming from this place of making sure that the child is going to end up in the most. I would, maybe I'm idealizing this, but my understanding of it is that it's coming from a place of ensuring that the child is going to end up in the most successful posture, position to grow up and have a healthy existence and have a beautiful life. And we know statistically and spiritually that a child will have the best chance at a good life if he has a mother and a father. And even uh, President Barack Obama has been cited saying that much, right? Barack Obama was even a believer in this notion that a child was going to be best suited to have a mother and a father, and we see it in the statistics. We see it in the reason behind a lot of the rising crime rates is a fatherless childhood, and all these different things. And so, when we know that this is a fact, and we essentially say, yeah, but there are couples out there, there are same sex couples out there that would really love to have a kid, so let's just let them get a pet, right? Let's just let them have a dog. We're committing a tremendous crime against the dignity of those children when we're more concerned about appeasing some people that just would love to have a pet. You know, I know that that might feel a little bit cruel, but again, I'm coming from the standpoint that I have dear friends who have very real and challenging and emotional fertility issues that would love the opportunity to adopt. And some friends that have adopted. So I'm not trying to diminish whatsoever that struggle. Anyways, Peter.
No, thank you. A few different thoughts with that. Number one, first and foremost, as a society, we've prioritized the wants of adults over the needs of children. And it's one way
Yep.
we've commodified them, right? Number two, I would never say that two individuals of the same sex couldn't love a child. I think they absolutely can. The question, though, becomes like, what is the ideal situation for a child? And we believe,
Right.
and I think sociological studies back this up, that the best environment is for a child to have both a mom and a dad kind of in the household. The third thing, though, that is pertinent to this issue, and maybe we could wrap up the show here because I've got to go. I've got a family to go, love myself. But in Italy right now, they actually just banned surrogacy, which is a huge, huge step where you're at. It's an important one, too, because when you begin to take the child out of those ideal situations or trying to put them back into ideal situations, again, because we recognize there's going to be brokenness in our society and culture. We almost wish there wasn't a need for adoption, but the reality is that there is. But when you start to do that, you make children just simply a want. So I want to have a child, and thus I deserve to have a child. Thus I can take any means necessary to have what I want. And in many cases around the world, what we're seeing is gay couples will pay a surrogate to house a child that they've maybe adopted from an IVF clinic, to birth the child and then to give up the child. But that leads to so many different issues and challenges, including sometimes surrogates being asked to abort the child because it wasn't up to the physical standards that the parents wanted, again, because they want the perfect child. So we got to get away from this. A child is a want of mine to back to what every child is. A child is a gift, and gifts are freely given and freely received. They're not something we can demand. Gifts are simply a beautiful thing that the Lord bestows upon us, including children. And children, no one has a right to a child. The only right that comes to a child is when mom and dad have created a baby. They have a right to and a responsibility to care for that child and to educate that child for years to come. So, folks, that's a whole nother issue. We could bring up more surrogacy and things of that nature. But those types of issues are very real here in the United States, again, and they could affect religious liberty. It could be affected by freedom of speech unless we really research, and know where the candidates stand on these kind of foundational issues. So I encourage you, read the thoughts of what Kamala Harris says about free speech. Read the thoughts of what Donald Trump has to say about free speech, religious liberty. Look at what their administrations have done. 4 years of Donald Trump, 4 years of Kamala Harris. Again, their record will illuminate for us beyond their rhetoric where God is calling us to go when it comes to our particular vote. Again, not telling you have to go out and vote for Donald Trump, but I am saying that there are serious concerns with voting for Kamala Harris and the positions that she has taken on our top three priorities here: life, family, and religious liberty. But we'll talk more next week on The Catholic Citizen. Thank you, live from Northwest Ohio, and Nick from Italy. God bless you. Come back to the motherland. Come back to the United States of America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, as soon as you can. Take care, everybody. Talk to you next week.